I'm the Assistant General Manager here at Envirotech Education. Thank you for joining me on the couch for a cuppa. We have a very exciting episode of Enviro-live. This is our third episode, and I'd like to thank those who are watching yet again. The feedback that we've had from the past two Enviro-lives has been very exciting, and we're very excited to have you join us again, and we look forward to the next episodes that we're going to discuss. So I'd like to take a moment now to introduce our panel, or actually I'd like to get the panelists to introduce themselves. So I'd like to start with David Lennon. David is our Head of Marine at Envirotech. David, would you like to share with everyone a bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Paula. Hello, everybody. Good evening. My name is David Lennon, and I've got 30 years experience in the environmental sector, mainly marine. I was obsessed with the sea since a little kid, and then became a commercial diver, and then did oceanography, became a marine scientist and studied impacts on marine environments. And then I wanted to fix impacts. So then I did a master's in environmental management, built my first artificial reef in '91, and then became obsessed with how to design structure for fish and other marine organisms. And that also then lent into reef restoration. How do we repair reefs? Got involved in coral relocations, so you can actually move corals out of dredge zones. And that has been an interest of mine. And it's actually one of the units that we teach here at Envirotech. So that's a little bit about me. Over to you, Paula.
Thanks, David. I'd now like to introduce you to Dr. Sander. Sander, would you like to share a little bit about yourself?
Yes, of course. Hi, how are you doing? This is a very exciting opportunity. My name is Sander Scheffers. I've been a marine ecologist for about 26 years. And what I've been doing is look at the climate change impacts on coral reefs, looked at climate change impacts on coastlines, and I'm really excited to present this particular webinar or live with you.
Thanks, Sander. And Tiffany. Tiffany is actually in the United Emirates, so in Dubai. So she's part of our team as well. Tiffany, would you like to share a bit about yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Paula. Hi, everyone. My name is Tiffany. As Paula mentioned, I'm based in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. I started, or should I say ended, my studies with a PhD in marine conservation, having a look at endangered species and anthropogenic impacts on those populations. I then moved to the sunny desert, where surprisingly we actually have a lot of marine life, a lot of really interesting and diverse populations, communities, and coral reefs that are able to survive and thrive in these regions. So for the last 5 years, I've been consulting on marine conservation projects, and it's a really unique and interesting time to be a part of this sector. Thanks, Paula.
No, thank you, Tiffany. And I'm very excited to have such a wealth of knowledge here for discussion. And if at any stage you have questions or comments, please write them in the chat section. So that we can have an engaging discussion that's not just about us talking to you, it's about you sharing with us. So I'm obviously not coming from a marine background. I thought I knew what corals were, but in actual fact, until David taught me, I realized I didn't know that much about it. So given that we could have some people in our audience who are in the same boat as me, I'd like to ask Sander if he could begin our discussion today by just explaining to us what corals are, what coral reefs are.
Okay, thank you, Paula. Yes, from my coral reef ecology background, I do know a lot about coral reefs and the interactions with the environment. And basically, corals are a simplified version of a jellyfish, evolved over time. They evolved to build a little skeleton around them and sit on the ocean floor. And that's how they get there.
Sorry to interrupt, Sander, but you said like a jellyfish. So you're telling me that corals are not a plant?
No, corals are actually an animal, and just like a little jellyfish, they sit on the ocean floor and build their own house around them, their own skeleton, sit there, protect, that skeleton protects them, and then they filter out, as you can see in this little picture here, with their tentacles, just like jellyfish, they capture prey.
Wow.
And those animals actually have evolved over time, the corals, and they really captured zooxanthellae, little plants. So they have a symbiosis or a mutual beneficial relationship with plants, and because of that, they are so successful.
Okay. So in terms of, I know you've got an image there of what a coral reef looks like, what a healthy coral reef looks like. Would you like to describe the aspects of a reef as opposed to one coral?
Okay, so basically all of these little polyps, they built their own skeleton and they built a massive coral reef. And with all that calcium carbonate or that really that limestone, they built their own houses. And because of that they built basically corals. They are the keystone species on the coral reef. And that is a nursery for many fishes, other animals, other plants. So
I'll just interrupt for a second. Fatima, can you just show us the image that we had of the coral reef? I mean, I'm sure we've all seen a million before. No, the coral reef, not the polyp. That's it. Thank you.
yeah. So basically what you see here, these are thousands and thousands of little polyps or coral polyps together. This is one colony of a coral, and there are many, many, many more. As you can see in this picture, there are 3 different species of coral in there. You've got so many different forms and shapes. You've got all these fishes there. Corals are amongst the highest biodiverse ecosystems in the world.
So the fish that are there, I know, David, you spoke before about diversity enhancers, little houses. David, are these corals with the fish there, is that like a house for them, or am I wrong?
Oh, absolutely. You watch. Yeah, you can see them, how they're living outside of the coral right now, but there's quite a few that are in. So when you swim up to a coral reef like that, they'll all scoot down into the coral and hide. And then when you swim away, they'll all come back out again and feed in the water
And what
column.
do they feed on?
Oh, these guys feed on the water column, so plankton that's coming by.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for that. And thank you for the comments that have been coming in and people talking about how amazing corals are. And I think because they are amazing, that's why it's become so topical and people are really worried. And as you can see from this image, one of the major threats is coral bleaching. And my question before I knew anything about corals was, I know it's beautiful if it's colourful. Why does it matter if it's white, Sander?
Well, as I said before, these little coral polyps, they formed a symbiosis or a mutual beneficial relationship with algae. Now, when temperatures rise too far because of climate change or some other factors, then these algae are producing an oxidative stress. So basically they form radicals. There's an analogy with if you're in the sun too much, you burn, you get sunburn. So this is basically what's happening to these coral animals as well. The plants are producing free radicals which are damaging the animal host. And that is the time that the animal host is saying, okay, bye, you have to go away. And then that symbiosis, or that what really makes the coral, is then broken down. And when those animals, or those plants, sorry, the zooxanthellae, are thrown out, then you can see over time that the corals are only showing this skeleton. This is the white skeleton, and yeah. So
in terms of, obviously, okay, coral bleaching, that's something we hear about a lot. But I know that you wanted to touch on something that doesn't get as much exposure or publicity, and that's ocean acidification. Would you like to share with us about that?
So, okay, when we talk about climate change, we only think about warming sea surface, warming terrestrial temperatures, but climate change is induced by emissions of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Now, when that carbon dioxide is increasing, what is happening at the moment, the oceans are acidifying much faster because there's a whole range of chemical reactions in the oceans. So the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere goes down into the oceans, and those skeletons of those corals are based on carbonate, which is a form of carbon dioxide. Now, the carbon dioxide is not, or sorry, the carbonate is not freely available to the corals anymore, and because they can't build their skeletons, they basically dissolve. So if you put limestone, and you have limestone and you put vinegar over that, an acid, that's what's happening in the oceans. Basically, they dissolve. The houses of these coral polyps dissolve, and then what I said before, they turn into little jellyfish again, without any protection. They can't settle on the ocean floor, and that is what's devastating coral reefs at the moment.
So do you think we've got, which one's doing more damage, acidification or temperature at the moment?
At the moment, temperature is doing more damage. However, the evil twin, ocean acidification, is also combined with rising sea surface temperatures, impacting. It's not a 1 and 1 is 2 equation. It is 1 and 1 is 3. It makes the whole ecosystem turn apart, because not only corals use calcium carbonate or limestone as their skeleton. We've got sea urchins, we've got sea stars, we've got forams, which are little planktonic algae. All of these organisms are using, they all use calcium carbonate as their skeleton, and they all get dissolved, basically. And some organisms withstanding that better than others. So yes, it is.
So boys, I'm not going to let you run the show. We've got 50-50 here with the girls. So Tiffany, I'm sorry I haven't had you involved yet. Given that you're in the United Emirates, and given that it's very hot over there, well, what's the situation with corals?
We have quite a unique marine ecosystem here, and that coastal environments are typically very hot, they're very arid, they're very dry. And then when you move through your seasons, we have quite significant temperature fluctuations. So our oceans at the moment, when we hopped in the water last week, were actually around 35 degrees. And they're coming down from the mid 36 in terms of degrees Celsius. So this is really, really hot. In winter, they get as cool as your high teens. So this is quite a unique ecosystem, and it's very different to what you'd see in the Great Barrier Reef. David, what are the temperature ranges that your corals in the Great Barrier Reef experience?
Oh, you probably not get down below 20.
Yeah, so our corals here are able to survive or thrive all the way up to about 36 degrees. But as Sandra said, there does come a limit. It does get to a point where exposure consistently to temperatures above 36 degrees Celsius for an extended period of time will start to actually destroy those corals, their processes, and their physiological function. And this is where we start to see bleaching events. Bleaching events here in the Gulf are quite common. Unfortunately, they're increasing in nature, and this is largely due to global warming, climate change, and a number of different anomalies. I know you see a lot of bleaching on the Great Barrier Reef as well. Is this normally isolated to your summer months, or do you find bleaching all throughout the year? Maybe you could explain the difference in the temperatures for our audience.
David, Sander, who wants to take that?
So basically, bleaching events normally happens between, in El Nino or La Nina years, when, especially in El Nino years when sea surface temperature warm up. In the summer months, absolutely. Over here, I think the highest sea surface temperatures, and this is interesting to know, Tiffany, is that it's over there, it's 36 maybe, or 35. However, even in the warmest waters, what we have off Cape York, it's not getting warmer than 33 degrees. So maybe those corals in the Red Sea are basically adapted to higher temperatures. That's very interesting to know, and maybe we can do something with that as well.
Absolutely. There's been a lot of research at the moment in terms of what actually drives resilience, what makes coral strong, what makes it hardy, how can it actually survive in these really harsh conditions. And a lot of research is coming out of the UAE at the moment in terms of, is the resilience associated with the zooxanthellae? Is it the bacteria that are actually genetically resilient to be able to withstand these high thermal thresholds? Or is it a combination of both the host, so the coral, and the zooxanthellae collectively? So what are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's the bacteria or it's the coral that's driving resilience and hardiness in the region?
Well, I do think it's probably the zooxanthellae. I know of certain researchers looking at taking zooxanthellae which are more temperature tolerant, and transplanting those zooxanthellae into corals which are less temperature tolerant, and maybe try and change that around. So that's basically modification of corals. It can be a way forward because climate change is inevitable if we are not stopping all the emissions of fossil fuels. So, yeah, there are many ways that there are hopes, but I think maybe David can tell us also something about what solutions can be or not.
Can I just interrupt for a second? Because Paul has made a few comments, and he has one there. Can you see it on the screen there, panel?
Yes.
Yeah, so he's saying that always temperature and acidification and climate change are being affected by fossil fuel burning. So would you like to comment on that, David, to begin with?
Yeah, so he's saying both acidification and climate change are being affected by fossil fuel burning. We find ways to fix that. We fix both issues. Yeah, definitely. And it's good to see some progress being made. I don't think we're going to be moving fast enough. I think it's we're just not doing it fast enough. And I think nature is going to throw up some curveballs here because there's some unexpected things that happen in nature that aren't in our models. Even our best models don't predict some unexpected things that are occurring. So yeah, you're right. We need to keep on fixing it. It's very embarrassing for Australia that we've lost so much of our barrier reef, and we're one of the laggards in climate change. We're doing, it's frustrating.
It is. And, I know that it is true that we have some latest techniques and solutions that we're going to discuss. But I just wanted to flag at this particular point in time with what you're saying, what Envirotech Education is trying to do in terms of creating an army so that we have a lot more people trained more quickly to be able to get onto this issue. And as the head of Marine, would you like to comment on that, David?
Yeah, so there's a number of things, a number of actions we can do to help out reefs. Now, we can actually physically get involved. Now, that's on the smaller scale. We're not talking about saving the whole barrier reef, although there's some strategies that are looking at that, and there's some real innovation. In fact, bacteria, Tiffany, you mentioned bacteria. Well, somebody's looking at probiotics and finding in aquarium that probiotics, believe it or not, healthy.
Oh, like you cooked.
Like you get from Chemist Warehouse for your healthy gut. You can have healthy coral guts, I guess. But some reason probiotics help corals bleach. So maybe there was some way to seed probiotics over large reef areas, maybe with one of those crop sprayers, or there's. And what's interesting, Santa, because I think you told me too that if you've got fish in your tank, the corals don't bleach compared to if the tank doesn't have fish. So there's a relationship with overfishing and the health of coral reefs, because the fish are contributing something to the reef that reduces the coral bleaching. Of course, we've gone and fished out a lot of reef areas, so it's chipping away at another weakening.
Which is absolutely true, David. Yes, overfishing is a big problem, not only because we fish out herbivorous fish, which are grazing the algae of the reef, of the corals, which are smothering corals, but also, yes, the feces of fish are very important. Somehow, we don't know the whole mechanism yet about how that all works. But yes, the feces are producing something which is healthy for coral reefs. So basically, we're fishing out the reef, and the corals are actually thriving with more fish.
Okay, so are you guys suggesting that people shouldn't eat fish because it's causing problems?
Well,
that is a very difficult question. I wouldn't pose it like that. We can always do it sustainably. So that is basically also what we're teaching with Envirotech. Sustainable management of oceans, of ecosystems. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'll just interrupt because we've got a question there, a really good question. Linnell, any data on boat impact on ocean acidification and corals?
Wow.
Challenging, boys.
Yeah.
I think, is that boat or both?
Boat.
Boat impact. Oh.
Yeah. She's saying like E-class outboards.
Well, I know your large ships produce a huge amount of fossil fuel, CO2 into the atmosphere. So the shipping lines, big container ships contribute quite a bit to the CO2 in the atmosphere. So there's ways they're looking at how to reduce that. But I don't think your outboard boats are going to be contributing anything compared to what else we're putting into the atmosphere with cars, shipping boats, airlines, of course. Airlines putting it right up there into the atmosphere. I wouldn't think boats are too much of an issue. And there's actually, they're looking at a way of creating micro bubbles with boats. And the micro bubbles will reflect the sunlight and reduce the temperature, the sea temperature, by using some sort of vessel, creating lots and lots of micro bubbles. So that's one of the strategies that they're looking at.
Okay.
One of the things I wanted to contribute is, for instance, the loads of carbon dioxide we're putting out in the atmosphere right now, or that was in 2019, hasn't reached the same concentration as 3 million years ago. So basically 3 million years ago, the concentration of carbon dioxide was the same as now. And at that time, the ocean, the sea level, was 25 meters higher. And they all go hand in hand. So that is a very, very, very disconcerting factor. So we have to reduce all of the carbon dioxide emissions in order to save everything. So to reduce ocean acidification and to reduce the impact of warming sea surface temperatures.
Okay. You know, it's so exciting. We've got so many questions coming in, and if I don't answer, flag one of your questions, I apologize, but our panel will definitely get back to you. But I just like, David, can you see that question there from Kim?
How much do you think that the significant land source nutrient pollution from adjacent poor land practices contributing to greater cod population than other impacts? Yep, impacting health of coral reefing's ability to withstand. Yeah, absolutely. We got nutrients fueling the plankton, and then the plankton gives more food for the juvenile cots in the planktonic stage, and then you get cod outbreaks. Which, if you don't know what a cod is, by the way, I better mention that there's a crown of
thorns.
Yeah, Paula, you're picking it up. We need to give you a certificate. You're going to earn that marine degree. Yeah, but it wouldn't surprise me if there's. Although maybe ocean acidification might kill off some of the cots, the crown of thorns, because they've got calcium. There might be one benefit.
Possible, yes.
It wouldn't surprise me if they don't like warmer temperatures. You know, I bet just for the purpose, they probably.
I know when I was speaking to Dave from Inlock, and they have a COTS program up north. And he was talking to me about, I said, well, you know, why have they suddenly become an issue? And he was talking about the off run of like fertilizers and things is feeding them, and therefore they're populating in plethora amounts. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Because they've got a planktonic stage where they're little tiny guys, little babies, and they're swimming along before they settle out. And they need to feed on something. So they're feeding on the plankton. And, of course, nutrients, just like nutrients for plants on land, are fueling more plankton, more food for them. So they're getting nice and fat and healthy, and they settle out and more of them survive, basically. That's one theory. So you got more of them surviving, which then grow into adults and, of course, cause problems. And they can chew through... They just chew through coral. They just, you know, hundreds of square meters in a day. They can just wipe out coral that's taken 30, 40, 50 years to grow. You know, it's gone in a day. Very sad.
Yeah, it is sad to hear. Someone's asking about not only the COTS, now someone's asking about microplastic. So, Tiff, do you have any input on microplastics, how they're affecting the ocean or corals?
Oh, definitely. I read a paper on this lately, and as you know, these little polyps, the corals, they take up all the plankton, and they confuse these microplastics, the very, very tiny things, for food. So they eat that, but they don't get any nutrition from it. So that is a very, very bad thing as well.
If you were in our Enviro-live, do you remember, David, when Roberta was talking about the washing machine?
Yeah. People don't realize that a huge amount of microfibers come from our laundry, and it gets flushed down, and it doesn't get filtered out in the sewage. So if the sewage is discharged to the sea, you've got billions of little microfibers. You know, an incredible amount comes from our synthetic clothes. So that's why it's good to get a laundry filter. You can buy various ones. And I've also got a video online of how to make one from a $2 shop. So you can go and buy items at your $2 shop and make a laundry filter to get your microplastics out.
Can you make me one?
Yeah, I'll make you one.
You're a legend. Tiff, did you want to add anything to all the things that we've just been talking about?
I wasn't going to touch on microplastics, but macroplastics. Sometimes you see tremendous problems here in terms of consumption by turtles, by dolphins, by fish, and all these sorts of things. And you need to remember that a lot of these other species actually help support healthy corals. So turtles, for example, eat tremendous amounts of sponges, and sponges actually compete with corals for space on the reef. So the more healthy, happy turtles we have chomping away at all our sponges, the healthier our coral reefs are and the more space there is for them to grow.
Now,
So
not to sound ignorant, but can you explain what you mean by a sponge?
A sponge. Oh, if we're stepping into that.
I know the sponge in my kitchen, but...
Oh, goodness. So sponges, just like anything else within the marine ecosystem, they have a tendency to aggregate on your hard substrate and your benthic substrate. They're an animal. They're a food source in much the same way as a jellyfish is a food source for a turtle that may be confused as a piece of plastic. Sponges are a little bit harder. And it's a primary source of food and nutrients for these turtles. So it's really important that they come up, they eat the sponges, there's more space for our corals to grow on our reefs.
Can I chip in that, Tiffany? I think sponges, you're absolutely right. They are competing for space on the coral reef. Like, you've got a tropical rainforest, everything competes for light over there. On a coral reef, it's competition for space. So these sponges actually have chemical warfare. They go and they dig into the coral skeleton. So if they've got a big advantage of a weakened coral skeleton because of ocean acidification, those sponges win. And that is really, really, really detrimental to a coral reef, because as I said, these corals are the keystone species of the whole
You know
coral.
what, guys? This discussion has been so exciting and invigorating, and I cannot believe how much time has passed so quickly, and we haven't got on to the positive side of what we can actually do, and that it's not all morbid, and it's not all dire straits. So I might cross to David. David, I know you're excited about some innovation and latest techniques. Would you like to share some of that positivity with us?
Okay, yeah, I hope so. Yeah, well, definitely there's some really exciting research being made, and we've got to remember that coral restoration is still really young, but unless we have a go, we're not going to figure it out. So we can actually plant corals, for example. They're not a plant in terms of having a root, but they can be broken off into little pieces, or it doesn't have to be little, they could be bigger pieces, and actually reattached to a degraded reef. So we can have a coral nursery, what we call a nursery, just like on land. You have a nursery with little plants growing, and when they get to a certain size, you go and plant them wherever you want. So there's fantastic initiatives now, including on the Barrier Reef. We've got one group, the they're called the, got to get the name right, Coral Restoration Foundation. They've got a goal to plant 1 million corals by 2025. So 1 million corals. So, and I know, Tiffany, you've been involved in a project to plant 1 billion trees. So we're not quite there with corals yet. But yeah, so, and that's one of the things we teach in our certificate course at Envirotech in marine habitat conservation and restoration, is how to design and build a coral nursery, how to break the little corals in a special way and make lots of little baby corals, and how to actually plant them onto the reef. So that's one of the things that we cover. You can also collect the coral spawn. Now, coral actually ejects, a lot of them eject the spawn, the sperm and the eggs into the water column in one big event. Tends to be an annual event. And it's a coral spawning, which you probably heard about in the news. And the coral, the eggs, sperm get together, make larvae, little coral larvae, swim around until they find a happy place on the reef to settle out. Now, there's some interesting research where they're corralling that coral larvae, like a coral slick, and they're moving that to somewhere that's degraded, because unless the currents will carry that larvae to that degraded area, it'll never get recolonized. So we can enhance, and there's just hundreds of billions of these. So even if we're taking a small part, it's not going to affect things. But we corral it up and move it to a location and let it settle out onto a degraded reef. So that's one of the interesting initiatives that's happening. But we're getting better at planting, better at nurseries, figuring out how to accelerate the growth of corals before we plant them. We get really good survival rates of planted corals, anywhere from 50, 80, 90% survival. And it's, even though this is perhaps on the smaller scale, we're not talking about planting corals over the whole Great Barrier Reef, but it's really important for maintaining diversity, maintaining species, particularly on our areas where we're using them a lot. So when we've got a reef where we're using that reef a lot for diving, snorkeling, boating, fishing, and the reef gets worn down. It's just like visiting a park with thousands of people visiting a park and not having any maintenance of that recreational park. We wouldn't do that on that.
That's the big push that we've got with this course. It's the first certificate qualification in the entire world. So essentially, not only does that mean that we can train people in a shorter time span, it means that they have some very practical hands-on skills. And so the more people that we can train to do this, the more people that can go into jobs that become the gardeners of the ocean, and the volunteers who can actually not endanger a place because they actually know what to do and what the skills are. And I also think it's very exciting what some of our students have been doing with going and collecting data and analysing habitats to flag areas that are of concern. So like what you said, we can then identify, for example, in a tourist place, let's not go to that part of the ocean until it is recovered, and let's go here. That's the type of thing?
Yeah, we give areas a break, cycle how we use them, give them a chance to recover. And like you were saying, we need people to actually do the planting, and that's where our course is designed to be the practical people. Like you're saying, the gardener. We need that workforce. And we've also got a Reef Cpr program, so recreational divers know what to do when they come across a broken coral. You don't have to just leave it there anymore and let it die. And like Tiffany was saying about microplastics, well, you see a lot of cases where there's fishing line, plastic bags wrapped around coral, just killing it. So simple strategy is, collecting that, unwrapping it, and taking it out of the ocean. So there's all kinds of things that we cover, and all sorts of things that people can actually do, especially recreational divers, to help reefs.
Yeah, and you know what sorry, go Tiffany.
No problem. I was just going to touch on what David said. So there are a number of global institutions that have these like reef check courses. So for example, Reef Check Australia. You've got PADI that helps to look after marine debris. And this is where you can go on the weekend. It's perhaps 1 day, 2 days, and a couple of dives. You learn some theory and you learn how to make a positive impact to the environment you're going to. And these are really great as introductory steps to get an understanding of what you're doing as a leisure diver. But if you actually want to learn more and be able to proactively contribute and make a difference, it's really important that you have more robust training, so that you have a look at, like your vet education programs that actually give you more theoretical knowledge as well as practical hands-on experience on real-life projects. Because it's one thing to swim around and go, okay, I know that coral is damaged, that's great. But it's entirely different things to actually be embedded in a real-life project and be able to make a meaningful difference. So to be able to go, all right, this is a denuded reef bed, we're going to make a change. I know how to cut this one piece of coral into 6 to make 6 little coral colonies and help to kind of re-establish that coral within the reef.
And I think that's where our course has, it's only just been released last year, and it's having great traction with people. They're so excited. And it's not just people excited because they want to study it to go into a career. There's people who are just excited because they want to do exactly what you said, Tiff. They want to actually help in any way that they can. And so this course allows them to do that. And what you said, David, about, the fishing wire and stuff, people don't find, I found that people have a real connection, connection of their soul with the ocean. So to go down and unwind fishing wire or collect garbage, it's something that people don't find a chore. They're passionate about doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you really fall in love with corals once you start thinking about them and noticing them. And it really pains you when you see them bleached or broken. You get very attached.
If you step outside of corals as well, even if you think that they are just pretty to look at but not necessarily too interesting, just remember the diversity of life that they support. Remember that they are feeding grounds for your sharks, your turtles, your gorgeous pufferfish, all those beautiful marine animals that we love to see when we hop into the ocean. So every little bit that we do to help our corals really is going to help facilitate ecosystem change.
Yeah. So I'm conscious of time. I have had someone ask about what do you recommend reading. We have some fantastic resources at Envirotech. So rather than name all the things here, I recommend that you get in contact with us. Before I sum up about Envirotech, I'd just like to ask each of you to briefly sum up on what we've talked about here today. So we might start with Sander.
Sorry, what was that again?
Just briefly sum up on what the topics we've talked about here today so we can finish our discussion.
Okay, so basically coral reefs are in danger. Coral reefs are in danger from climate change, ocean acidification, and we at Envirotech are aiming to do our best to teach students how to deal with this challenging environment. That is basically my takeaway message of this.
Thank you, Sander. And Tiffany?
In terms of what we've spoken about today, corals are really cool. They do a lot for us. They do a lot for our fish, for our dolphins, for our turtles. It makes me really sad when I go diving to places I used to be in the past and I don't see all the lovely turtles that I used to see there. So anyone who is interested in marine conservation, the information is out there, the tools are out there, and so are the resources. And if I had more people that had just a fundamental understanding of coral and how it works, there would be opportunities for embed in my projects, so people can come, they can learn, they can see the dolphins while they're diving. It's a really, really unique opportunity to be engaged in, and I recommend it to anyone who loves the ocean.
Thanks, Tiff. Yeah. And David?
Well, there's power in numbers. So individually, we might be able to save 100 corals, but together as a group, campaigning our politicians for climate change and actions against climate change, plus offsetting your emissions, getting your electricity from a provider that plants trees and offsets emissions. When we can fly again, make sure you offset your emissions from your flight. Look at ways we can do that, because that then helps. That's ultimately helping our marine life, not just corals, but everything else living in the ocean too.
No, thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much. I really encourage you to go to our website. You will be able to see there our environmental sustainability courses, our marine courses, all complementing what we're talking about here today. We're very excited about our mission and our direction, and we want to work with everyone so that together we can save the planet. If you have any questions, please message us on our social media, or you can email us at info@envirotech.edu.au. If you have any comments, just like our last two Enviro-lives, people had comments and feedback about the episode, we'd love to hear from you, and also any suggestions of what you'd like our next Enviro-live episode to discuss. We look forward to it. I look forward to joining me on the couch for another cuppa and another discussion with our experts. So thank you so much, Sander, David, Tiffany.